In today's presentation, we're looking into how to identify the risks associated with new vulnerabilities. This is an area where many organizations struggle, and the main reason they struggle is a lot of new critical vulnerabilities, 0 days, etc., all come out, big scary names, getting news headlines. There may be ongoing attacks, but there's a lot of information out there to the general public. Everybody's seen the information. So immediately we have customers asking salespeople and the business what you're doing to protect their information and to protect your business so they can have confidence in you. Your business people are coming to the cybersecurity professionals saying, what are we doing here? We need to give information back to our customers. We need to know the organization protected, what is being done. IT are turning around to cybersecurity professional and saying, what do we need to do? Do we need to patch? Do we need to do something? Or we don't need to worry about this? Everybody's coming to cybersecurity professional. So it's a point of being very stressed. A lot of people want information now, and you need to answer them. The first thing I say is stop. You cannot answer anybody unless you have assessed the situation, and you need to have an idea of the risk. So before you go back giving information, deciding what to do, remember a wrong decision can have a bigger impact to the organization and cost more money than the vulnerability. So you need to first identify the risks. So to identify the risks, we start off with three key areas. One is finding more information about this vulnerability. What is the threat associated with this vulnerability? What assets in our organization are impacted? From the vulnerability, we first start with a very basic information, which is what operating system, software, and our hardware is infected by the vulnerability. We need to know this specific information so we can find out what manufacturer or vendor we need to go to find out what patch they're doing. Is a patch being available? Is there mitigation out there? What information they're telling us, when they will have a patch, and help us understand the vulnerability more. We also need to find out, does it have a CVSS score? What is the score? Is it under review? And the CVS will also give us a lot more information to try and help us. We then need to understand, and our second point to go to is our scanning vendor. So most organizations today would have vulnerability scanning tools. So check with your vendor. Do they have a pattern, a detection available that you can actually update your scanner, or maybe it's automatically updated to allow you to check for this vulnerability? If not, when they will have it, and also read information that they have because they will be a trusted source for information on this vulnerability. You also need to look at patches and mitigation for the vulnerability. Both hopefully are available, because you might say, look, the vendor has a patch, great, we're out of the woods. You're wrong. How many systems need to be patched? How long would your organization take to patch this? What's all involved in the patching? Do you need maintenance windows? You need to take down critical production systems? Can patch systems cope with the level of patching? So is there mitigation that can be put in? Because there might be certain systems you need to put a mitigation in till a maintenance window can be arranged. There might be certain systems that you can't patch. There may be other software too that could be impacted. So having both a mitigation plan and a patching plan for a vulnerability allows you to cover most angles. The threat. So we have identified the vulnerability in the last slide. We need to know what is the threat associated with this vulnerability. This helps us understand what we're dealing with. So the best way to understand the threat is to know what happens if an attacker tries to exploit the vulnerability. Do they get admin access to the system? Do they just gain a level of access, but they still need to do something else before they can steal data or do anything? Do they actually get access to download data? What is happening when they exploit this vulnerability? This is very important to know because it actually helps us to understand the impact. We also need to know what type of skills does a hacker need to exploit this vulnerability. We might find, look, this can be done by a novice, or this is only something that's so complex, we're talking about the black hats, the elite hackers. If that's the case, we know there's lower chance it's going to be exploited, but we also need to then step and say, is there exploit code there? Because even though something might say, look, This can only be exploited by the elite, black hats, etc. If exploit code is there and somebody black hat has actually provided exploit code, script, etc., now it's a free for all. That means anybody who uses exploit code or follows the exploit instructions can, from a script kiddie to a want to be hacker, etc., start attacking your systems with the possibility of exploiting it. It also means people who are going to design malware, ransomware, update botnets, etc., to automate the process of exploiting this vulnerability also have the information they need. So the entire attacking scenario has changed. Is there any reports that the vulnerability is currently under attack? A lot of different security sites, trusted sites will provide information like this out there. What type of activity is targeting this vulnerability? Because we need to know what's going to happen out there and what is the target to it. Is user interaction required? Is authentication required? For user interaction, if we know that the only way for this vulnerability to be exploited, and this is what the vendor is saying and all the security threat websites are saying, is through user interaction, we know more than likely the attack pattern will be a phishing attack, where the user needs to click on a file to execute it, or they need to actually click on a link to execute the link so that the attack can happen. Is authentication required? If the system is externally facing and no authentication is required, we are not going to see this attack coming. It means the system is going to be exploited before we know. If authentication is required, we can at least be watching for someone trying to authenticate the system or trying to gain access to a system before they can actually exploit the threat. So it means there's other things we can watch for to try and protect our systems. Has any malware been released? Again, another game changer. If malware has been released, this could be in a form of ransomware, etc. We know the attack could be anywhere, it could hit us at any time, it could go across the internet in days, and it could be a massive impact. So it gives us an idea how fast we need to react, how quickly we need to react, and how scared we should or shouldn't be. An area which, in my experience, most security professionals and IT professionals have failed to look at is there any other vulnerabilities, if combined with this one that's on our systems, could lead to a higher threat level? Because sometimes we're looking at a vulnerability, it's coming out in the media as really bad, things could happen, but we realize authentication is required, user access is required, or they need some other way onto the system. The other way onto the system that might bypass user interaction, authentication, etc., could be another low-level vulnerability. By having both vulnerabilities on the system or a combination of other vulnerabilities could mean the attacker can sneak behind your defenses, exploit the system, compromise it without you knowing anything was ever happening. So it's important that you assess the vulnerabilities on the systems that are potentially at risk to understand, is there multiple vulnerabilities that changes the risk level. Assets, this is where we step into our organization. So we have been looking at the threat from outside our organization, understanding it. Now we're actually looking inside our organization. So the first thing is looking at our asset registry. And every organization should have a registry of their assets. So we already know what could be impacted. We're searching that to identify how many assets could potentially be impacted to get us a picture of what is the impact level. Are those assets internally or externally facing? Again, our asset registry should give us an idea of how many of these assets are internally or externally facing. How important are these assets? And again, we're only taking the assets that are at risk, we know, to this potential vulnerability. And we want to know how important are they to the organization? Are these mission critical assets that if they're compromised, it's going to cost the company billions to take offline to patch, it's going to impact customers and impact solutions we're providing to customers or services? Maybe the impact systems are just on non-critical systems that we can turn off. So there could be staging systems, test systems out there that until we have a solution or until we're able to do anything about the risk, these could be assets we can simply power down to reduce the risk, or that we can put other controls in place to restrict access without causing an impact. Or one of the big scary parts is where many people turn around from developers to IT, and say, look, these systems are just test systems that are impacted. They're staging, they're non-production systems. We just test production, we do quality control on them. They're non-important. So there's no need to patch or take any action. Do they have production data? A lot of staging development systems, developers use live production data in the staging, testing, and pre-prod. Why? They want them to perform the same way as production, and they want to look at. So these systems could allow the same data leak. Could we have data with the same data? We have to think, what happens if this is out? It's not that we ignore these systems. We must consider them. If they have production data, then they are the same as production systems and should be treated with the same security level. What if this test system, which is non-important, means that if compromised, the attacker can use it for lateral movement or to get a foothold in the organization? So just because we thought it wasn't important, we have to consider what happens if the hacker gets control of it, what can be done to the organization, and what security do we have in place that could reduce the risk? Again, this is looking back to our own cybersecurity profile and saying, look, we got these tools. We know that we can potentially detect the risk. We might be able to put different changes to our firewalls, to our IDSs, IPS, host IPS systems to actually detect or mitigate this threat. And there may be other security solutions we can do to prevent it getting in and to reduce the risk of attack. So these are all important things to decide because we may not have a patch, we may not have mitigation. We could be trying to come up with something in a very short time period. So we are assessing what we have. Now that we have gathered information on the vulnerability, the threat, and the assets, we are stepping back, looking more at our organization. I always recommend we need to understand the impact using the CIA triad. So we need to understand the impact to three areas: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We then step to look at the impact to the organization. Fixing this, and this is where other departments will get involved too. What is the cost of fixing this organization? It might be a small cost, it might be a major cost, all depending on what we're looking at, downtime of systems, maybe loss of service to customers while we're actually doing things, or maybe there's almost no cost. What is the financial cost to recover or if compromised? This is an area that so many organizations get wrong. Anytime I've asked this, I've often got, now we can just restore the backup on that server. We just delete the server, wipe it, and drop a new image on top and we're grand. Wrong. Financial cost is not the cost of just putting that system back online. If that system is compromised, is data leaked out? Has there been a data breach? Is there an impact to customers? Is there a brand impact? Brand impact could be that it got leaked, that the system got compromised. It's publicly known that the system got compromised. Now do your customers trust you? Has your brand been damaged because this was a vulnerability that shouldn't have been internet facing and was internet facing and you got compromised? So the financial cost has to consider what it's going to cost the company. Is it going to impact your stock price? Is it going to lose customer reputation? Is the brand going to be disgraced by it? What is the overall cost, not just repairing a system or replacing a system? So taking everything that we have here, where we now have information, the vulnerability, the threat, and the assets and the impact, we step back to where we can fully identify the risk. So this chart I've put together, your organization should have a chart like this. But behind this chart should be another document, which is a process document or procedure document that has been signed off by the business and has been reviewed by everybody from cybersecurity to IT to business management. And the actions that you're going to take based on the risk level that we see here would all be in that document, which is govern how you deal to risk in relation to vulnerabilities. So for example, we look at the likelihood of this vulnerability being exploited on your system is very likely, but the impact to organization is minor, so we're seeing this identifies as a medium risk. So you'd go back to that whole risk governance process that your organization has signed off, and they might have decided going for a medium risk associated with a vulnerability. We take no action. We monitor the situation and we allow the vulnerability to be patched on a regular patching cycle, which happens weekly, monthly, etc., as we believe that is sufficient to deal with this risk. Maybe the risk was low and your organization decided we accept this risk, we do nothing. We can't justify the cost or the time put into this risk, and the impact to the organization is so low that nothing is going to really happen. It's not something we're going to put our time into. We want to use resources for more important stuff. Where if it jumps to critical, for example, the organization's strategy would probably be different. If it jumps to unacceptable, I'm assuming it's going to be right. Everybody drop what you're doing. We are taking action on this right now. We are going to have an action plan, and action will be immediately taken because we have to protect the organization, our customers, and our business. So again, this whole risk will be addressed, and it's not something that a cybersecurity professional should be deciding on how we act in each situation. It should be done through a proper governance system for risk, where the organization decided how you deal with a low, medium, high, critical, or unacceptable risk in relation to a vulnerability. And that's where the cybersecurity professional comes back to IT, comes back to board and management and says, from the research I gathered on this vulnerability, I have assessed, looking at our corporate risk structure, that this is a medium risk. So as per our corporate risk guidelines for vulnerabilities, here is how we're actually going to proceed in dealing with this risk level. And that's the way whole risk structure in relation to understanding what to do with new vulnerabilities should work in an organization. So hopefully this presentation was helpful and gives you an overview of how you could approach it and what you should do in relation to vulnerabilities. Thank you very much.